Good morning, and thanks, Sam, for reading Psalm 23 for us this morning in probably one of the coolest settings you could possibly have for that. Today we're talking through verses 3 and 4, and there's really three different phrases that kind of stick out to me in this passage. And the first one is this, that he restores my soul. I've heard 1,000 people now on TV commercials or sermons or just talking about how these are crazy times, unprecedented times. I'm so tired of hearing how the times are so different. But let me tell you, in addition to what we've all been going through, let me tell you what's been going on in our house. We have been without air conditioning since May. We've had 9 different people come out to try to fix it, and it's still not fixed. Our son has a pet snake, and about 3 weeks ago, he got out, and we couldn't find him. A couple weeks ago, we came home from work, and Bernie got home first, and the TV that was hanging on the wall had fallen off and shattered everywhere. Then just last Friday, we had a sewer blockage, and all of our water was backed up, and we couldn't flush toilets and we couldn't use running water. It was crazy. What I wanted in that moment was things to be restored. I wanted them to go back to the way they were. Now, fortunately, the sewer got fixed. We found the snake. We fixed the TV issue. We still need some air conditioning, but most of it has been restored. One of the things that this passage says to me here is that he restores my soul. How much more valuable is our soul than those things I just mentioned? I had a friend in Colorado who every time I saw him would ask me, "How's your soul?" And it was a much deeper question than, how are you doing? What are the circumstances going on? Do you have a snake running around the house? He was asking how the core of me was. How was my soul? It's the most important thing that we have, is our soul. And this phrase right here, he restores my soul, means so much because of what he's doing to the most important part of us. We're going to pause right now. I would like you to pause, and I wanted you to ask this question to whoever you're with. Pause and ask this question. How is your soul? Pause now. You know, the second phrase that stood out to me in this passage was that God guides us in the path of righteousness. And looking up that word righteousness, one of the things I found is oftentimes it's interchangeable with the word justice. I remember as a kid, one of my main arguments when I tried to get out of something was to say to my parents, "This isn't fair." I would say it probably encompassed about 72% of my arguments. It wasn't until I became a parent and my son used that line on me that I really understood it in its much more full sense. What I realized was he wasn't going to get away with it either. But what I did appreciate was his heart for justice. His heart in that moment for making things right. You know, I think there's this constant battle that we all go through, where we want to make things right. We want to make things right with other people. We want to make things right with God. We want to make things right between the governors and those governed. There's this constant battle for justice, for righteousness that wars in our soul. If you don't think this is true, let me tell you a story. My favorite restaurant in the entire world is in Taipei, Taiwan. It's in this area of Taipei called Ximending. And it's a little dumpling shop that's kind of down this little alley. This is the best restaurant in the world. They make you dumplings to order in the moment, and they make them fresh. And you can have anything you want inside of these dumplings, chicken or pork or vegetables. And then they have a combination of sauces that numbers probably in the hundreds, maybe even thousands. And what you do is you order them on a piece of paper, you hand it in, and then in about 10 minutes they ring a bell and they call your number. And you get to go up and you get to have these dumplings. And they're still hot from the oil. And they smell delicious. And the first bite is amazing every time. But where fairness comes in this is this. What happens if they short you one time and you only get 9 dumplings? Or maybe half of your dumpling gets caught in the fryer and it gets pulled off and you only have 9.5 dumplings. That passion for righteousness or for justice looks like you running to the front counter and saying, "Where's my other dumpling?" It is kind of funny though, when you get 11 by mistake, that same passion isn't there. Usually you go straight to Instagram and say #blessed. There's a passion in all of us for justice and for making things right. So my second question for you right now is this. What is it in your life right now that needs to be made right? Pause and talk about it. The third and final thing that stuck out to me in this passage was this. When David said here, "I will fear no evil." Now, what's interesting about David is in the previous books prior to Psalms, you see his life played out. You hear all the stories of what he did, what he accomplished, where he did things well, where he did things wrong. But it's the book of Psalms that is really, much of it is his diary. It's his feelings. It was what was going on inside of him while all these stories were taking place. And one of the things he says here is, "I will fear no evil. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me." Now what's interesting about this is David early in life was a shepherd. And a shepherd would carry a rod and a staff with him to keep the sheep in line. Now the rod was more probably like a club, and it was more like, maybe think of a baseball bat. And that wasn't used to beat the sheep. That was used to fend off predators. And think of the traditional shepherd's staff, with the hook that goes around. And that was probably many times used to kind of pull the sheep back in, to hook them and bring them back to safety. And he says here, David says here, "I will fear no evil." Your rod and your staff, I see that you have those, and those comfort me. I ran into someone a couple weeks ago, and before I could get a word out, this guy had already just started reeling off 3 different major things that were going on in life, and how he was so afraid of each of these things. And my first response in all of that was, man, this is a lot to carry. Here's the thing. We don't have to carry this. We don't have to fear evil. God is there to comfort us, like he does with the sheep. So my third question is this. What is it that you fear right now that you need to give to God? What is it that you need to lay down? Pause again, ask the question, and we'll come back in just a second and we'll wrap this up. So as we come back and we wrap this thing up, I want you to do this one thing for me. I want you to go after these 3 questions with passion. With the passion that my grandma had. Now you might think, that's a weird thing to say. What, was your grandma very passionate? She was. She's the person in my life that I think I got the drive that I have from. She always wanted to see what was over that next hill. I remember one time she was on a mule ride down the Grand Canyon, and then in the first turn, she fell off the mule and broke her wrist. But she didn't want to go back. She had finished the entire ride down and back up with a broken wrist. I remember one time I was in my mid-20s, and my grandma had visited 49 states, and I'd been to 42 at that point. The only state she did not have was Vermont. And Bernie and I were on vacation in Vermont. I found a postcard and I mailed it to her. And I said, "Grandma, Vermont is beautiful. You should come check it out sometime." And I wrote Grandma 49, Matt 42. What was weird, she usually responded to me right away when she got postcards. She'd give me a call. But I didn't hear anything. And a few months went by, and I remember sitting in my house and walking down and getting the mail and pulling a postcard out of the mail. And it was from my grandma. And it was from Vermont. And she said, "Vermont is beautiful. Grandma 50, Matt 42. I never should have mocked her. But she had passion. I want you and encourage you to go after this Psalm 23 and these phrases and these questions with the passion of my grandma. Let's pray. Father, thanks for the words of comfort you give us. Thanks for the words of restoration you give us. Thanks for the words of making things right you give us. We love you, Jesus. Amen.